Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
The twinkling lights on our family Christmas tree cast a warm glow across the living room as I stepped back inside from the bathroom. What I saw next would shatter everything I thought I knew about family loyalty. My father Robert stood beside my sister Ashley, both wearing expressions I'd never seen before. Cold satisfaction mixed with cruel triumph. Ashley clutched a thick stack of legal documents against her chest, like a treasure. "While you were gone, we finalized something important," my father announced with chilling calmness. "Your house has been sold to cover Ashley's debts." Ashley's lips curved into a vicious smirk. "Now you've lost your house, big brother?" I just smiled quietly. "What's so funny?" Ashley snapped, her voice sharp with irritation. I looked directly into her eyes and said, "The house you sold is actually—" The words hung in the Christmas air like smoke from a dying fire. But before I could finish my sentence, the full weight of their betrayal began crushing down on me. My mind raced back 3 years to when I first decided to buy that house. My small piece of the American dream that I'd worked myself into exhaustion to afford. Those were brutal months of sacrifice that most people couldn't understand. I'd taken on extra shifts as a construction foreman, working 12-hour days under the scorching Ohio sun and bitter winter winds. Weekends found me doing handyman jobs for neighbors, fixing leaky faucets, and painting fence posts for $20 here, $50 there. Every penny mattered when you're trying to save for a down payment in Columbus' competitive housing market. While my friends went to sports bars and weekend concerts, I stayed home counting savings. My social life consisted of packed bologna sandwiches and coffee from a thermos instead of restaurant meals. I drove a 10-year-old Ford pickup truck with a dent in the passenger door and windows that had to be cranked down manually. The radio only worked on AM stations, but I didn't care because I was focused on something bigger than temporary comfort. Ashley's lifestyle during those same years painted a completely different picture. After dropping out of Ohio State halfway through sophomore year, she bounced between part-time jobs like a pinball. 1 month she'd be serving coffee at a local shop. The next month, she'd quit because her manager didn't understand her creative spirit. She lived rent-free in our parents' basement, treating it like a luxury hotel with maid service. Our father, Robert, had always made excuses for Ashley's choices. When she quit her job at the clothing store because she didn't like folding shirts, he called it finding herself. When she maxed out her credit cards buying art supplies for projects she never finished, he said she was investing in her talents. But when I worked overtime to save money, he called me too serious and obsessed with material things. The day I finally closed on my 3-bedroom ranch house in a quiet suburban neighborhood felt like winning the lottery. The mortgage payments would be tight, but manageable with my steady foreman income. I remembered standing in the empty living room, keys in my hand, feeling proud of what persistent work could accomplish. It wasn't a mansion, but every nail and shingle represented hours of honest labor. Now, standing in my childhood living room with Christmas carols playing softly in the background, I watched my father's face as he delivered his devastating news. But something felt wrong about his timing. Why announce this on Christmas Day? Why wait until I was out of the room? My construction background had taught me to notice details that others missed, and this situation had more loose ends than a frayed rope. I pulled out my phone to check my banking app, expecting to see my usual balance. What I discovered made my blood run cold. My savings account, which had contained $53,000 that morning, now showed a balance of $12.47. The withdrawal was time-stamped just 2 hours earlier. "Dad," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. "You didn't just sell my house today. You also cleaned out my savings account." Ashley's triumphant expression flickered with surprise. She hadn't known about this additional theft. Robert's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. "You signed that power of attorney form last year when you had your appendix surgery," he said defensively. "It gave me authority to handle your finances in emergencies." "That was for medical emergencies only," I replied, my construction worker instincts kicking in. "You don't survive on job sites by accepting faulty explanations. Not for you to steal everything I've worked for." Ashley stepped closer to Robert. and I noticed how they'd positioned themselves between me and the front door. This wasn't spontaneous. They'd planned this confrontation down to the smallest detail. Ashley needed help immediately, Robert continued, his voice carrying that familiar tone he used when justifying her latest crisis. You've always been selfish with money, Sean. Your sister was desperate. Ashley's mask slipped completely then. You can always make more money, she said with casual cruelty that took my breath away. I couldn't wait any longer for my life to start. The Christmas tree lights seemed to dim as I realized this wasn't just about money. This was about a father would never respected what it accomplished, and a sister would never seen me as anything more than an ATM machine. They'd waited until Christmas, surrounded by family and holiday warmth, to deliver the coldest betrayal imaginable. The next few minutes unfolded like watching a building collapse in slow motion. I'd spent years working construction, so I knew how to read structural damage. The cracks in Ashley's story were about to bring down everything she'd built. Show me the debt documentation, I said, keeping my voice level. If you're going to steal my house and my savings to pay Ashley's debts, I want to see exactly what she owes. Ashley clutched the legal papers tighter, but Robert nodded toward her. Show him, he said. He deserves to know where his money went. She reluctantly spread several documents across the coffee table near the Christmas tree. Credit card statements, personal loan agreements, car payment notices. It looked legitimate at first glance, but my years of reviewing construction contracts had taught me to spot inconsistencies in paperwork. This visa statement shows a balance of $8,400, I said, picking up the first document. But the account number doesn't match the standard format. And this personal loan from Midwest Financial Services. See, I've never heard of them. Ashley's face flushed red. You don't know every financial company in Ohio, Sean. Actually, I do business with most of them through construction loans, I replied, examining another paper. This company doesn't exist, and look at these dates. You supposedly took out this loan 3 months in the future. Robert leaned over to examine the documents himself, and I watched confusion replace confidence in his expression. Had been played just as thoroughly as I had, but his pride wouldn't let him admit it yet. Ashley, he said slowly, explain these inconsistencies. My sister's composure cracked like ice on a frozen pond. She looked frantically between the papers and our father's increasingly suspicious face. The elaborate lie she'd constructed was falling apart under basic scrutiny. Fine, she exploded, throwing the remaining papers onto the floor near the Christmas presents. You want the truth? I don't owe money to creditors. I owe it to my future. The room fell silent except for the gentle humming of Christmas lights. Even the background music seemed to pause. Marcus and I have been planning to move to Los Angeles for his music career, Ashley continued, her voice gaining strength as she embraced honesty for perhaps the first time in months. We need money to start fresh, to get away from this boring place where nobody appreciates talent. Robert's face went pale. You lied to me about being in debt. I told you what you needed to hear. Ashley shot back without remorse. You've always said Sean was too successful for his own good, that he looked down on us. I just showed you a way to level the playing field. The truth hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. This wasn't about financial emergency or family loyalty. Ashley had manipulated our father's wounded pride and resentment into a weapon aimed directly at my stability. You convinced Dad that I was arrogant and selfish, I said, the pieces falling together. You made him believe I needed to be taught humility. Ashley's smile returned, cold and satisfied. It wasn't hard. He already felt that way. You buying that house while we struggled just proved what I'd been telling him all along. Our father stood frozen between us, realizing he'd been played by his own daughter, but instead of apologizing, his pride dug in deeper. Maybe the methods were wrong, Robert said defensively, but the principle stands. Family takes care of family, and you've been hoarding money while we struggled. What struggle? I asked incredulously. Ashley lives rent-free in your basement. You and Mom have steady income and health insurance. Meanwhile, I've been working 70-hour weeks to build something stable. From the kitchen doorway, voices of our arriving relatives drifted into the living room. Cousins Janet and Tom, Aunt Susan with her husband Rick. They were beginning to witness this family explosion. Their confused faces appeared in the doorway as raised voices replaced Christmas carols. "What's going on in here?" Janet asked tentatively. "Sheen's throwing a tantrum because we solved Ashley's financial problems," Robert announced, still trying to control the narrative. But I noticed something else troubling as I processed what Ashley had revealed. If she'd been planning this California move for months, how long had my father been helping her prepare? How deep did this deception actually go? "Dad," I said, a new fear creeping into my voice. "What else have you done? If you've been planning this with Ashley for months, there's more you're not telling me." The look that passed between Ashley and Robert confirmed my worst suspicions. This Christmas Day revelation was just the tip of a much larger iceberg. The silence stretched like a taut cable, ready to snap, as I studied my father's guilty expression. Construction work had taught me that when you find one structural problem, you'd better check the entire foundation. I pulled out my phone and started checking my other accounts. "Sean, what are you doing?" Robert asked nervously. "Checking for more damage," I replied, fingers moving across my phone screen. My side construction business checking account appeared first. The balance should have shown nearly $15,000 from recent jobs. Instead, it displayed $312. "My business account," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Dad, you've been stealing from my business too." Ashley stepped forward aggressively. "It's not stealing when you've been cheating us for years." "Cheating you how?" I demanded. But I was already checking my email for missing client payments. Several jobs from the past 2 months showed no payment records, despite my clear memory of clients telling me they'd mailed checks. "You've been intercepting my mail," I said, the horrible realization washing over me. "My business clients have been sending payments to my home address because I work out of my house." "You've been taking my mail and cashing my checks." Robert's face revealed the truth before his words could deny it. "I considered it back rent," he said defensively. "You lived here for 3 years after high school. We never charged you properly for room and board." "I moved out 5 years ago," I shouted, my composure finally cracking. "And I paid you rent those 3 years. We had an agreement." "Not enough rent," Robert replied stubbornly. "Not compared to what you earned later." The front door opened with a burst of cold December air, and Ashley's boyfriend Marcus walked in carrying a bouquet of flowers for my mother. He was exactly what I'd expected: worn leather jacket, carefully disheveled hair, and an attitude that screamed entitlement. When he saw our tense family tableau, his face lit up with cruel amusement. "Hey, Robert," Marcus called out cheerfully. "Thanks for handling the Sean situation like we discussed." Ashley was worried her brother might cause problems. The casual way he said "like we discussed" sent ice through my veins. This stranger had been part of planning my financial destruction. "How long have you 3 been coordinating this?" I asked. Marcus draped his arm possessively around Ashley and grinned at me with perfect white teeth that probably cost more than my monthly truck payment. "Since spring," he said proudly. "Ashley told me about her uptight brother who was sitting on all that cash while family suffered. I suggested we level the playing field before heading to Los Angeles. We've already put deposits down on a studio apartment in Hollywood," Ashley added gleefully. "Our plane tickets are booked for next week. Marcus has meetings lined up with record producers who heard his demo." I noticed our relatives in the doorway backing away from this increasingly ugly scene. Aunt Susan looked horrified, while cousins Janet and Tom exchanged uncomfortable glances. This wasn't the Christmas gathering they'd expected. But Marcus wasn't finished gloating. "Your dad showed me your financial records months ago," he said casually. "We figured someone with that much money could spare some for family who actually needed it." "You showed him my private financial information?" I asked Robert, disbelief mixing with rage. "I wanted him to understand Ashley wasn't just dating some deadbeat," Robert replied. "I wanted to prove our family had successful people too." The irony hit me like a brick wall. My father had tried to impress Ashley's boyfriend by showing off my financial success, then helped them steal it all. I continued checking my phone, and each discovery felt like another blow to the stomach. My retirement account had been emptied, with massive tax penalties reducing the value by nearly 40%. Credit cards had been opened in my name, with balances I'd never authorized. "This is identity theft," I said quietly. You've stolen my identity to open credit accounts. We're family, Ashley said dismissively. It's not theft when it's family money. There's no such thing as family money, I replied. There's money I earned through my own work, and money you stole because you were too lazy to earn your own. Marcus stepped forward aggressively, his musician's charm replaced by street-level intimidation. Watch how you talk to my girlfriend, construction boy. We're trying to be civilized here. Civilized. I laughed bitterly. You call stealing someone's life savings civilized? From the kitchen, my mother appeared with a worried expression. She'd been preparing Christmas dinner, but the shouting had obviously reached her there. Robert, what's happening? She asked. The whole neighborhood can hear you arguing. Just explaining some financial adjustments to Sean, Robert said, trying to downplay the situation. Nothing that concerns you, Linda, but I noticed how my mother avoided eye contact with me. Her nervous, fidgeting, and guilty expression told a different story. Mom, I said gently, did you know about this? The way her face crumpled told me everything. She'd known, and she'd stayed silent while they destroyed my financial security. Your father said it was for the best, she whispered. He said Ashley needed help, and you'd understand eventually. The betrayal was complete. Not only had my father and sister stolen everything I'd worked for, but my mother had watched it happen without warning me. I stood alone in that Christmas living room, surrounded by people who shared my blood but had never truly been my family. The weight of complete betrayal settled on my shoulders like snow from a collapsed roof. But my construction instincts told me to check for additional damage before the building completely fell down. I walked toward the front window to clear my head, and what I saw in the driveway sent my world spinning into free fall. My pickup truck was gone. Where's my truck? I asked, my voice eerily calm. Robert's satisfied smile told me this had been planned too. Sold it this morning to Jerry's used cars on Main Street. Got $4,800 cash. Ashley clapped her hands together like a child opening presents. We needed quick cash for last-minute expenses. Your truck was just sitting there doing nothing on Christmas morning. That truck gets me to work every day, I said, struggling to process this latest theft. How am I supposed to get to job sites? Details, Marcus said with a dismissive wave. You're a resourceful guy. Figure it out. But Robert wasn't finished with his revelations. He pulled out a manila folder from the hallway closet, the same closet where we'd hung our coats as children after sledding in the backyard. I also need to tell you about your retirement account, he said, spreading out more official-looking documents. Had to cash that out too. Ashley needed funds immediately, and that money was just sitting there, earning small interest. I stared at the 401k withdrawal papers, showing my entire retirement savings, $28,000, had been liquidated that very morning. After penalties and taxes, they'd netted roughly $18,000 from an account I'd been building for 6 years. You destroyed my retirement, I asked, my voice barely audible. You're young, Ashley said carelessly. You have decades to build another retirement fund. I only have one chance to make it in California before I'm too old. Marcus pulled out his own set of papers with theatrical flourish. And just to make everything legal, he announced, we've got documentation showing Sean needs financial protection. The papers he showed made my blood freeze. Medical documents claiming I had a gambling addiction. Psychiatric evaluations declaring me financially incompetent. Legal forms granting my father authority as my financial guardian. These are completely fake, I said, examining the forged signatures and made-up doctor names. Try proving that, Marcus replied smugly. We've been building this case for months. Bank records showing erratic spending patterns. Witness statements from family members about your irresponsible behavior. Medical opinions from licensed professionals. I realized they'd created an elaborate paper trail to justify every theft legally. Anyone investigating would see documents suggesting I was mentally unstable and needed protection from my own poor judgment. The house buyer is paying cash, Robert announced, delivering his final blow. Closing is tomorrow morning. You have 72 hours to move out completely. Ashley stepped closer, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Maybe now you'll learn what it's like to struggle like the rest of us have. Maybe you'll develop some empathy for people who weren't born with your advantages. My advantages? I asked incredulously. What advantages? Working 12-hour days? Eating bologna sandwiches while you ordered takeout? Living in a tiny apartment while you lived rent-free? Natural advantages, she replied. You're a man in construction. The world handed you opportunities I never got. Our relatives had quietly left during this exchange, unwilling to witness our family's complete destruction. I stood alone, facing 3 people who'd systematically dismantled my entire life while planning their escape to California. The Christmas tree lights continued twinkling cheerfully, a mockery of the holiday spirit that was supposed to bring families together. Instead, they'd used Christmas as cover for the most devastating betrayal I could imagine. Marcus checked his expensive watch and nudged Ashley. We should finish packing tonight. Our flight leaves early tomorrow, and we still need to collect the cash from the house sale. Flight? I asked. Red-eye to Los Angeles, Ashley explained happily. Well, be gone before you even finish processing what happened here. By the time you figure out how to respond, we'll be 3,000 miles away starting our new life. Robert handed me a business card. This is the number for social services, he said. They can help you find temporary housing and job placement assistance. Consider this a learning experience. The cruelty of it overwhelmed me. They'd stolen my house, my savings, my truck, my retirement, and my business income. Then they'd created fake documentation to justify it legally. Finally, they were fleeing the state to avoid consequences while leaving me homeless and financially destroyed. But as I stood there, absorbing the magnitude of their betrayal, something Marcus had said earlier began echoing in my mind. They'd been planning this since spring. My father had shown Marcus my financial records months ago. They'd been building a legal case to justify their actions. If they'd been watching my finances that closely for that long, they should have noticed what I'd done in June. My smile returned slowly, and I felt the first hint of warmth I'd experienced since walking into this nightmare. You know what? I said quietly. You're absolutely right. This has been a real learning experience. Ashley's victorious expression faltered slightly. What's so funny now? The house you sold, I said, completing the sentence I'd started an hour earlier, is actually owned by a family trust that I created 6 months ago. The sale you completed today is completely invalid. The silence that followed my words felt like the moment before a controlled demolition brings down a condemned building. I watched Ashley's face cycle through confusion, denial, and slowly dawning horror as my meaning sank in. What are you talking about? Robert demanded. I have power of attorney. I signed all the papers legally. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a different manila folder. One I'd been carrying with me since October when my suspicions first began forming. Construction projects taught you to prepare for problems before they happened, and family problems required the same advanced planning. In June, I started noticing irregularities. I explained calmly. Mail arriving late. Financial statements that seemed tampered with. Strange questions about my accounts. So I scheduled a meeting with attorney James Peterson downtown. Ashley grabbed the documents from my hands, her fingers shaking as she scanned the legal language. This says you transferred ownership to an irrevocable family trust. That's exactly what it says, I confirmed, with myself as the sole beneficiary and decision-maker. As of 6 months ago, you don't own my house, Dad. You never owned it. Which means everything you signed today constitutes fraud. Marcus snatched the papers away from Ashley, his musician's confidence evaporating as he read the trust documentation. This can't be legal. You can't just transfer property to avoid family obligations. Actually, you can, I replied. It's called asset protection, and it's perfectly legal when done properly through licensed attorneys. Every signature is notarized. Every document is filed with the county clerk's office. Robert's face had gone gray. The buyers, they paid cash. They're expecting to close tomorrow. Then they're going to be very disappointed, I said, because they just paid for property that was never legally available for sale. They'll want their money back immediately. I pulled out my phone and showed them the screen. I've been recording our entire conversation tonight. Every admission of theft, every detail about your planned conspiracy, every threat Marcus made, all documented. Ashley lunged toward me, trying to grab my phone, but I'd already uploaded the recordings to cloud storage. Her desperation was beginning to show the cracks in her carefully constructed plan. "You can't use those recordings," she said frantically. "We didn't consent to being recorded. Ohio is a one-party consent state," I informed her. "As long as one person in the conversation knows about the recording, me, it's completely legal evidence." My phone buzzed with an incoming text message. I glanced at the screen and smiled. "That's my attorney, confirming he received the recordings." I said, "James Peterson has been standing by since this morning, waiting to hear from me." The front door opened, and James Peterson himself walked into our living room. He was a compact man in his 50s, with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. I'd texted him during the confrontation, and had been waiting in his car outside. "Good evening, folks," James said professionally, setting his briefcase down near the Christmas tree. "Sean asked me to stop by and clarify some legal matters." Robert found his voice first. "This is a family matter. We don't need lawyers involved." "Actually, you do," James replied, opening his briefcase and removing several thick files. "Identity theft, wire fraud, forgery, and elder abuse are serious criminal charges. The Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office takes financial crimes very seriously." Ashley's bravado completely collapsed. "Elder abuse? Not elderly. Financial exploitation of a family member through fraud and manipulation constitutes elder abuse under Ohio law," James explained. "The victim doesn't need to be elderly for the charge to apply." Marcus stepped toward the door, clearly planning to leave, but James blocked his path. "I wouldn't recommend leaving, Mr. Torres," James said, using Marcus' full name. "You're mentioned specifically in several recorded admissions tonight. Flight risk is a factor judges consider when setting bail." "I didn't do anything illegal," Marcus protested weakly. "Conspiracy to commit fraud, accessory to identity theft, and criminal intimidation all carry significant penalties," James replied. "Your recorded statements tonight provide excellent evidence of your participation. I watched my family's elaborate scheme crumble, like a house built on sand. The confidence and cruelty they displayed an hour earlier had been replaced by fear and desperation. But I need that money for California," Ashley whispered, as if saying it quietly would change reality. "The money you stole will need to be returned immediately," James informed her. "Plus, interest, penalties, and damages. Sheen's losses exceed $100,000 when you include retirement account penalties, credit damage, and lost business income." Robert sank into his recliner, the same chair where Head read me bedtime stories 25 years earlier. "I thought I was helping my daughter," he said weakly. "You were helping her commit multiple felonies," James replied, without sympathy. "The documentation they showed you was forged. The power of attorney was misused. The financial guardian papers were completely fabricated." Ashley looked at Marcus desperately. "Tell them you'll stay and help me fix this." But Marcus was already backing toward the door. "This is crazy, Ashley. I'm not going to prison for you. Find your own way to California." And just like that, Ashley's boyfriend abandoned her completely. The man shed destroyed her family relationships to please disappeared the moment real consequences appeared. I felt no satisfaction watching Ashley's world collapse, only a deep sadness that it had come to this. But James Peterson was just getting started with his revelations. "There's something else you should know," James said, pulling out another file. "Sean has been working with the Franklin County Financial Crimes Unit for 8 weeks now. Detective Maria Rodriguez has been investigating this case thoroughly." The color drained from my father's face as the implications hit him. "Police investigation," James nodded grimly. "Detective Rodriguez has been building a comprehensive case. The supposed house buyer who paid cash this morning? That was Detective Rodriguez working undercover to document the fraudulent sale attempt." Ashley's legs gave out, and she collapsed onto the couch beneath our family Christmas stockings. "The buyer was a police officer. Every conversation, every document exchange, every admission was recorded with full police cooperation," I explained. "When you bragged about stealing my truck this morning, you confessed to auto theft in front of a detective." Marcus made another move toward the door, but James shook his head firmly. Mr. Torres, I strongly advise you to remain here. Detective Rodriguez is waiting outside with backup officers. Running would only add evading arrest to your charges. Through the front window, I could see police cars with their lights off parked along our quiet residential street. The neighbors who'd grown up watching our family's Christmas celebrations were about to witness something very different. This can't be happening, Robert said, his voice hollow. We're family. Families don't send each other to prison. Families don't systematically steal from each other either, I replied. You had 8 months to stop this, Dad. Instead, you accelerated it. James consulted his notes. The bank has already frozen Mr. Robert's accounts pending investigation. All stolen funds will be held as evidence until restitution is determined. Ashley's California dreams were evaporating in real time. What about our apartment deposit? Our plane tickets? Forfeit, James said simply. You can't travel while facing felony charges, and you'll need every dollar you can find for restitution and legal fees. My mother emerged from the kitchen where she'd been hiding, her face streaked with tears. Sean, please don't send your father to prison. He's 62 years old. This would destroy him. For the first time that evening, I felt genuinely conflicted. My mother hadn't actively participated in the theft, though her silence had enabled it. And despite everything, Robert was still my father. That depends on him, I said quietly. If he cooperates fully, makes complete restitution, and accepts responsibility, the prosecutor might consider reduced charges. James opened another file. We've calculated the total damages conservatively at $137,000. That includes the stolen funds, retirement account penalties, credit damage, lost business income, and punitive damages. Ashley looked stricken. I don't have that kind of money. Then you'll be making payments for a very long time, James replied. The court can garnish wages, seize assets, and place liens on future property. Marcus finally realized his situation was hopeless. Look, I just listened to Ashley's stories about her brother. I didn't know she was lying about everything. Your recorded statements tonight prove otherwise, I said. You knew exactly what was happening. You helped plan it. Detective Rodriguez knocked on our front door, right on schedule. James had texted her when the confrontation reached its peak. She was a professional woman in her 40s with kind eyes but an absolutely no-nonsense demeanor. Good evening, she said, showing her badge. I'm Detective Rodriguez, Franklin County Financial Crimes Unit. I need to speak with Robert Mitchell, Ashley Mitchell, and Marcus Torres regarding ongoing fraud investigation. The next hour unfolded like a carefully choreographed operation. Miranda rights were read, statements were taken, and evidence was collected. The fake medical documents, forged power of attorney papers, and stolen financial records were all bagged as evidence. Ashley cried as handcuffs were placed on her wrists. Sean, you're my brother. How can you do this to family? I tried being family for 28 years, I replied. You chose to be criminals instead. Robert maintained his dignity better, but I could see the shame eating him alive. I genuinely thought I was helping her, he said quietly. I didn't realize how deep this went. The road to prison is paved with good intentions, Detective Rodriguez replied. Financial exploitation destroys families every day. Marcus tried bargaining until the end. I can testify against them. I can tell you everything they planned. We already have everything we need, Detective Rodriguez informed him. Your participation is fully documented. As they were led away to separate police cars, I felt a strange mixture of relief and sorrow. Justice was being served, but my family relationships lay in ruins. The Christmas tree lights continued blinking cheerfully, oblivious to the devastation that had occurred beneath them. James packed up his files and prepared to leave. The next few months will be difficult, he warned me. Criminal trials, restitution hearings, media attention. Are you prepared for all that? I looked around our family living room, remembering childhood Christmas mornings filled with laughter and excitement. Those memories seemed like scenes from someone else's life now. I'm prepared, I said. They made their choices. Now they live with the consequences. Detective Rodriguez returned with final paperwork. The prosecutor wants to meet with you Monday morning to discuss your cooperation as a witness. This case will likely result in plea bargains, but we want maximum restitution for you." After everyone left, I sat alone with my mother in the quiet house. Shed aged 10 years in one evening, and her Christmas dinner still waited unfinished in the kitchen. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we learn what consequences really mean," I said, "and what family loyalty actually requires." The hardest part was yet to come: rebuilding my life and deciding whether forgiveness was possible after such calculated betrayal. 6 months after that devastating Christmas evening, I stood in the kitchen of my own home, preparing coffee for my mother's weekly visit. The legal battles had concluded, the restitution payments were being made, and my family was slowly learning what real accountability meant. Robert had pleaded guilty to fraud charges and received 3 years probation with mandatory financial counseling. His pension remained intact, but his reputation in our close-knit community had been permanently damaged. Neighbors who'd known him for decades now crossed streets to avoid conversation. The shame was eating him alive, but it was also forcing him to examine behaviors he'd ignored for years. Ashley completed 6 months in county jail and was now working 2 jobs to make her monthly restitution payments of $850. Her dreams of California stardom had been replaced by the reality of stocking shelves at a grocery store and cleaning offices at night. Marcus had disappeared immediately after his release, leaving her to face consequences alone. The entitled young woman who'd demanded everything be handed to her was slowly learning the value of honest work. My mother had started therapy to address her pattern of enabling destructive behavior. Shed spent decades avoiding conflict by staying silent when family members made harmful choices. Learning to set healthy boundaries was painful for her, but necessary for any relationship with me to continue. The financial recovery had been smoother than expected. My asset protection strategies had saved my house and most of my savings. The construction business thrived as word spread about my integrity under pressure. Clients began referring their friends, appreciating someone who stood up for what was right, even when it cost him personally. More importantly, I'd met Sarah Chen, a third-grade teacher who'd heard about my situation through mutual friends. She admired how I'd handled the betrayal without becoming bitter or vindictive. Our relationship was built on honesty, mutual respect, and shared values about family responsibility. She understood that love meant accountability, not enabling destructive choices. This particular Saturday morning, my mother arrived early for our coffee meeting. She looked healthier than she had in years, having lost the constant stress of managing family drama. Her therapy was teaching her to speak up when she witnessed problematic behavior, instead of hoping it would resolve itself. "Robert asked me to give you this," she said, handing me a handwritten letter. "Has been working with his counselor on taking full responsibility for his actions." I opened the letter and read my father's careful handwriting. He acknowledged the depth of his betrayal, explained his wounded pride and resentment that had made him vulnerable to Ashley's manipulation, and asked nothing in return. No requests for forgiveness, no excuses, just genuine accountability and a commitment to making amends through consistent actions over time. "He knows he can't undo what he did," my mother explained, "but he's trying to become the father he should have been all along." Ashley's transformation had been even more dramatic. Losing everything she'd taken for granted forced her to confront her entitlement and selfishness. Her current letter, which arrived weekly with her payment, showed gradual character growth. She was learning to solve problems through work instead of manipulation, to value relationships over material gain. "I never understood what you sacrificed to buy that house," her most recent letter had said. "I thought money came easily to you because I'd never tried to earn my own. Working 70 hours a week for basic survival has taught me to respect what you accomplished." The extended family relationships had healed as the truth emerged. Cousins Janet and Tom, Aunt Susan and Uncle Rick, had all apologized for initially doubting my version of events. They now understood how skilled manipulators could twist facts and exploit family loyalty to justify terrible behavior. My business had grown to the point where I'd hired 2 employees and was considering expanding into commercial construction projects. The reputation I'd gained for standing up to family pressure had attracted clients who valued integrity above convenience. But the most important lesson had been personal. Id learned that true family love required boundaries, accountability, and mutual respect. Enabling destructive behavior wasn't kindness. It was cruelty disguised as love. Real relationships could only exist between people who took responsibility for their choices and respected others enough to be honest with them. Sarah joined us for coffee that morning, as she did every Saturday. She and my mother had developed a warm friendship based on their shared commitment to healthy relationships. Both women understood that love meant speaking difficult truths when necessary, not avoiding conflict at any cost. "Your father has requested a meeting next month," my mother said carefully. "He wants to discuss making additional amends beyond the court-ordered restitution." I considered this news quietly. Forgiveness wasn't a one-time decision, but an ongoing process that required consistent proof of changed behavior. Robert had made progress, but rebuilding trust would take years of reliable actions. "I'm willing to meet with him," I said finally. "But it has to be on terms that protect the boundaries we've established." Sarah squeezed my hand supportively. She understood that healing damaged relationships required patience, wisdom, and the courage to maintain healthy limits, even with people you loved. Over the following months, my father proved his commitment to change through small, consistent actions. He attended every counseling session, made every restitution payment early, and never asked for anything in return. He volunteered with financial literacy programs, helping other families avoid the mistakes that had nearly destroyed ours. Ashley's progress was slower but equally genuine. She completed her GED, enrolled in community college business classes, and started a small side business doing bookkeeping for local restaurants. Her monthly payments to me were always accompanied by letters documenting her personal growth and professional development. The Christmas following our family's implosion was quiet but peaceful. I hosted dinner in my own home, setting clear expectations about behavior and consequences. Family members who attended knew they were welcome as long as they treated each other with respect and honesty. Robert brought no gifts that year, understanding that his presence was conditional on continued good behavior. Ashley attended virtually via video call from her apartment, still working toward earning back the privilege of physical presence at family gatherings. "I learned something important this year," I said during our Christmas dinner grace. "Family isn't just about shared blood or holiday traditions. It's about people who respect each other enough to tell the truth, take responsibility for their actions, and work together toward everyone's well-being." The table included Sarah, my mother, cousins Janet and Tom, and James Peterson, who would become a close friend through our shared commitment to justice and accountability. We were smaller than previous years, but we were healthier. My mother offered her own reflection. "I spent decades avoiding conflict because I thought that was how you showed love. I learned that real love requires difficult conversations and hard boundaries. Enabling someone's destructive behavior isn't kindness, it's cruelty." As we shared our meal, I realized that while my family had been broken, it was also being rebuilt on a foundation of honesty, respect, and genuine accountability. The people sitting around my table were there because they'd proven themselves worthy of trust through consistent actions over time. The Christmas tree lights cast the same warm glow they had during my childhood, but the relationships beneath them were fundamentally different. They were based on choice rather than obligation, respect rather than manipulation, and love that required nothing more than honesty and mutual care. Later that evening, as Sarah and I cleaned up the dinner dishes, she asked me about my greatest lesson from the past year's ordeal. "I learned that protecting yourself isn't selfish," I said. "Setting boundaries isn't mean, and demanding accountability from people you love isn't cruel. Real relationships can only exist between people who respect each other enough to be honest about difficult truths." The year had taught me that family loyalty didn't mean accepting abuse or enabling destructive behavior. It meant caring enough about people to hold them accountable for their choices, while protecting yourself from their poor decisions. As we finished cleaning the kitchen, I reflected on how much my life had changed since that terrible Christmas evening. I'd lost my naive trust in family members, but I'd gained wisdom about healthy relationships. I'd experienced devastating betrayal, but I'd learned the value of true loyalty. Most importantly, I'd discovered that you could love people without accepting their harmful behavior, forgive them without trusting them, and maintain family relationships without sacrificing your own well-being. The future stretched ahead with promise rather than anxiety. My business was thriving. My relationship with Sarah was built on solid foundations, and my family relationships were slowly healing based on earned trust rather than blind obligation. Standing in my kitchen that Christmas evening, I realized that sometimes the best gift you can give someone is holding them accountable for their actions. It's the only way they can learn to respect themselves and others enough to build relationships worth having. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who were taking advantage of your kindness? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below about how you've handled situations where love and accountability had to work together. If this story resonated with you, and you believe others could learn from these lessons about healthy family relationships, please hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming life's challenges, and share this with someone who might need to hear that protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember that true family love always includes respect, honesty, and mutual accountability. May your own relationships be built on the solid foundation of truth, rather than the shifting sand of enabling harmful behavior.